Hello, everyone. I'm Wayne Grimm, curator for Resonance, the Exploratorium's new sound series. Thanks for coming. I kind of can't believe this is going to happen tonight, but it's going to happen. Tonight we have the amazing Roscoe Mitchell with William Wynand and James Fay performing Angel City. This is the second evening of Resonance this season. I just want to tell you about the upcoming concerts next year, 2014, February. The Freddie Maguire Show with Ann Maguire and Wobbly. Then April, we'll have Jem Finer, who's an amazing sound artist, composer. And June 2012, we'll have Colleen, Cécile Schott, is a French musician who does really beautiful things. And that will be our complete season. So just to tell you how tonight will work, we'll have a short conversation with Sarah Cahill and Roscoe Mitchell starting in just a moment, be about a half hour. Then we'll have about a 10-minute break. In that time, you can go to the bar, or you can go to the restroom, which straight out through those doors, and head down that way. Can't miss it. It's by the toilet you can drink out of. Also, if you're interested in grabbing a schedule, we have these postcards right over at the bar, and they have everything that's coming up listed just right over there. Please turn your cell phones off so as not to make sound or flashing lights. That's pretty much all I'm going to say, except thanks to everyone who made this happen, the Moving Images, public programs, the web team, and hundreds of other people here at the Exploratorium. We're really excited to have this amazing music happen here tonight. So please welcome Sarah Cahill and Roscoe Mitchell.
To be here and very exciting to be speaking with Roscoe Mitchell tonight. Thanks so much to Wayne Grimm for putting this series together and to the wonderful staff at the Exploratorium. This is really exciting, and I want to talk to you about what's happening on stage and what we're going to hear tonight, but I want to begin actually by asking you about your childhood growing up in Chicago and what music you listened to growing up with your family.
Well, I have to say that I'm probably from a different era where, you know, a radio station would play a wide variety of music every day, of all kinds of music. There was a lot of live music in the neighborhood growing up. It's the era of the jukebox where there was a wide variety of music on the jukebox, unlike it is today where a radio station might play the same piece over and over all day.
And was it your brother who introduced you to jazz?
Yeah, I guess you could say that it was my older brother Norman. We had these 78s, they used to call them killers. And we would sit down and listen to music, and he would teach me about the different musicians.
So you really started playing music in high school, I think, and you're one of the world's greatest saxophonists, but you also play flute, piccolo, clarinet, oboe, a whole range of instruments, and I wondered if that was a conscious choice because of the different sonic potentials of those instruments. How hard was it to learn so many different instruments?
Well, let's just say that I'm interested in music as sound, you know, so I think I play the instruments of a wide range because I'm interested to know how every part of the music works. The very high instruments kind of represent the top of the music, and then the mid-range instruments, the middle, and the lower instruments, the bottom. Although I don't really believe that in real time, I think that any instrument can play any role inside of a musical context.
Interesting. Tell us about what's on stage and what these instruments are that will be used tonight.
Okay, this is in 2011. I was invited by the Angel City Jazz Festival, and also honored by them for my 71st birthday. So this piece was written for that festival, Angel City. Also at that festival, Alex Klein did a larger arrangement of one of my compositions, People in Sorrow, for a wonderful large ensemble on that same concert. It seems like every year around this time since, something happens with this piece. Last year, over Thanksgiving, we did a recording of this piece, which will be coming out on Rogue Art Records next year. And then now I am honored to be here this evening, here at the Exploratorium, to do the piece here in the Bay Area.
So there's a recorder, I see. I mean, it's an unusual combination we have here. Isn't that true? There's a synthesizer. There's what's happening.
Well, I think it's true, but for me it's not strange though, because let's just say that let's talk about an improvisational situation.
Yeah.
I like multi-instrumentalists. You know why?
Why?
Because I can make them change instruments, and I know that they're going to pause and rest while they're doing that.
And what happens while they're pausing and resting?
Well, then they're confronted with silence, which is already perfect. So then it's on them to be able to bring themselves up to that level.
Now, how hard is it to find, I mean, James Fay and Willie Wynant are both incredible musicians, but how hard is it to find collaborators who can be multi-instrumentalists and are equally comfortable with composition and improvisation?
Well, I think that music is constantly evolving all the time. If I look at some of the photographs of the big bands a long time ago, I mean, the woodwind section was enormous. I mean, so many people doubled on different instruments and so on, and then we kind of moved into, from a jazz point of view, I think we kind of moved into where we had these virtuosos, on a particular instrument. But for me, I'm just interested in sound and putting it together in different ways. So that's probably why I have evolved into this multi-instrumentalist structure.
So there are three of you who are going to be playing all these instruments over the course of this performance. And how is that decided? Is it decided, well, let's talk a little bit about Angel City, which, as I understand it, is both, it's notated in some ways, and there's also improvisation. So tell us about the structure, how you wrote it, how it's evolved over the 2 years since you premiered it.
Well, it is constantly evolving. Actually, I mean, tonight's performance with the electronics with James is kind of a new element to the piece. When we performed it, the first performance of it, the premiere of it in LA was just James and I on woodwinds. But tonight we're going to start, I mean, with electronics and woodwinds and percussion to start the piece before we go to the first note that's on the piece.
How did you decide to add electronics?
I'm interested in all of that, although I don't really, play electronic instruments and so on like that. I've always been involved from the standpoint of view of trying to develop a language that I can speak with electronic musicians. I'd say it goes all the way back to David Wessel, when him and, I'm trying to remember the brass player's name, started the computer music conferences here in the United States. We were in Michigan. David was teaching at the University of Michigan State, and I remember him calling me one evening, and he was very excited. And he said, "Oh, you just have to come over. You've got to come over. I've been out here all night, and so on. You got to hear this." And so I went over there, and then he played one note for me, and that's when I decided that I better stick with my instruments and try to come up with a language, because if it took that much time to get a note, I didn't want to do that. However, it's really evolved, and then I remember then he went to Paris when they were building the IRCAM facility for Pierre Boulez, and him and a few other people were there helping composers that wanted to add this element to their composition and so on, like that. So, and it's an interesting journey for me, because the way I look at it is, if I hear something that's being produced electronically, then I have to ask myself, is this something I can play with? Or I've always felt humble in those settings, because to match some of the things that machines can do, is it's certainly challenging.
I thought machines were supposed to match things humans could do.
Well, it can go both ways. It can go both ways. I've played with both things. I played, or more than both. I played in the setting of where things are set. I played with interactive programming, where I could talk about George Lewis's Voyager program for a moment. What I found with that was that if you fed it a little bit at a time, you'd be more successful with being able to have a conversation with it. The particular version I was working with at that time, too much information, it would be harder to have something that was ongoing.
About this piece, Angel City, which we're going to hear tonight, I think some of us are comfortable with notated music, like myself. Some of us are comfortable with improvisation. It's rarer to be comfortable as you are with both, as you have been since you started playing. I mean, since the 60s, the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and all the different groups you played in over the years. And I wonder, a piece like this really shows those two elements, and these two players who are also comfortable going back and forth between notated music and improvisation. So how does that work? Take us through a little bit of the process of writing this piece and then working with James and Willie on it.
Well, that's a good question, and I feel it's essential for everybody that wants to be an improviser, is that they should study composition and improvisation as a parallel. What I think improvisation is spontaneous composition. So going back and forth and really knowing how composition works, it can help you to be able to achieve that in real time. This is what I'm striving to be able to do, is to actually create composition in real time. And it's not much different, I think, than writing a piece, except that if you're writing a piece at home, you actually do have time to think through different things that you might want to do. So the challenge with improvising is being able to identify what the structure is, and then being able to, well, it's still theme and variation, isn't it? Being able to approach it in one way or another way of developing it. If we look at, well, one thing I don't like is following, because following is like being behind on a written piece of music. It's like, you know your part, I don't really know mine, so I'm just kind of like waiting to see what you're doing. So that means that I'm behind you. And with improvising, it's the same thing. If you're creating a particular improvisation and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm waiting to see what you're doing. So therefore, I cannot, we're not communicating on the same level. It's all about communication, and then knowing what it is you can do in any particular situation. What we were talking just a little bit earlier about the electronic thing. I think that maybe right now I'm starting to look at a different way of putting things together with multiple sounds and sustaining sounds, being able to play other sounds against them, and trying to take it into like a kind of a real organic form. And that's something we have to work against too, is not allowing ourselves to go on automatic. I've always found that whenever I do that, and when I go back and listen to it, I don't really like that much what I'm listening to.
So you consciously choose people to work with, musicians to work with, who don't follow?
Well, you would hope that no one would. Yeah, that's the best situation. A lot of times when I work with my contemporaries, the ones that have continued to work on their music, and it helps to have these kind of like long relationships with people in music. It can be easier, but I've seen it evolve in a lot of different ways. I've seen the source of it evolve, and I've seen the younger musicians that come along after that have evolved into it in their way, you know. Sometimes I'm out doing concerts and some guy will come up to me and says, "Oh yeah, my dad brought me to your concert when I was 12," and so on and so forth. And you see how all of these things start to tie together and how they evolve. And the younger musicians that were in some of my bands, that were probably listening to the Art Ensemble and how they put it together and so on. So for me, it's interesting, very interesting period. I am attracted to people, though, that can be their own individual selves on the bandstand, or just in period. And that's easy to do once you can identify the musical elements that are going on. And so there's no reason to be lost or anything like that.
Will we be able to tell tonight when we listen to Angel City, will we be able to tell which parts you've written down and which are being improvised?
I hope not. But you might be able to, yeah, but I hope not.
You have the score up there, so we'll
yeah,
see you looking at the score.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
not looking
right.
at the score, maybe.
Right.
But so when you wrote this piece with James Fay and Willie Wynant in mind, right? I mean, do you orchestrate this piece? Do you think of the instruments that they play? You sort of have their sound in mind when you write?
Yeah, that, and then we're all at Mills. We get together and we rehearse and play all the time. I mean, that's where I come from. Always rehearsing, always practicing, and always playing. I mean, I may sit at home and think of something that I might want to do with them, but when I get together with them and get under the surface of the idea that I have, then it even shows itself more clearer in another kind of way.
I remember reading somewhere about you waking up early in the morning and practicing for hours. Do you still do that?
I would like to.
Yeah.
I am pretty soon, because I'm going to be off for a while. But I'm writing right now, though, for the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra is going to do a piece of mine in February. And they're also doing a piece by George Lewis, and they're doing a piece by Fred Frith. And we're also going to play in trio on their concert.
Great.
It'll be in Glasgow, Scotland.
Great. So that takes that. It's hard to find time to practice and compose. Then.
Yeah, it is. But it can work out. I mean, I think it's kind of good to get up from the computer and get away from it for a minute. But this has been a kind of a busy period, and school is stopping now too. So I just talk to me at the end of next week. Let me see how far I can get, with uninterrupted.
You mentioned composing at the computer, but we think of you as someone to whom sound and the combinations of sounds are so important. How much do you compose at the computer, away from instruments? How much do you sort of play, get the feeling of all these instruments? I mean, it's very specific. I guess what I mean to say is that there's such a range of instruments here, and so much potential, so many possibilities, but you obviously have to limit it somehow, and you're very specific about your use of combining a number of instruments together to create a particular sound. So how do you do that when you're at your computer?
Well, it took me a long time to go to the computer, because I was composing away from the computer, But what I like about the computer is it does some of the work for you. If you're writing a large piece, I mean, the computer lines up your music for you. I remember writing by hand. By the time you get it ruled out, you've almost forgotten the idea. So I like that about it. I like the way it communicates. I like the way you can send music to people all over the world, and they can have it instantly. And I like also, for the people that don't have really good penmanship, it's clear and people can really see it. I think that the technology is great in the hands of people that know what they're doing in the first place. So it's an easier kind of thing like that. And I like, too, that if you have a different idea, you can just say save as and save that particular composition. Other than like when you were writing, by hand, if you made a mistake further in on the piece, then it was more of a problem to change that. So that about the computer I like. The piece that I'm working on is an orchestral version of my composition Nonea right now, and I tend to, sometimes I can stay with things a long time, and for me that has been useful, because it really helps me to really get into the materials. So I'm very much familiar with these materials. This piece started off as one of 5 projected pieces for the solo saxophone. Simple idea was to have a piece that would sound like it was played on more than one instrument, on a solo instrument, by exploiting the different registers on the instrument, the low, medium, and high registers, and to take advantage of rapid changes from one register to the other with the wide interval skips and so on. And then following my process, And sometimes you can do this. People as composers know this. Sometimes you can sit down and just write something and it'll be right. The original line on this particular piece was like that for me. And after writing that and then playing it as a solo and using improvisation on that, started to inform what the process would be with this piece. Okay, we had the solo piece, and then we had 4 alto saxophones that had both written and improvised sections. After listening to the slow movement, it reminded me of strings, and I was talking with my friend Primus Fountain, who is a genius composer, who was living in Chicago at that time. And I said, well, maybe I'll do this for a string quartet. And he said, well, you know, since you did it for 4 of the same instruments, how about 4 same string instruments? And I thought, that's a great idea. So I was inspired, you know, after listening to some of the improv and so on like that, to set it for 4 cellos. And that was done out here in the Bay Area in the late 70s by the 1750 Art Ensemble. I had 3 performances of that. But you see what I'm saying? I'm starting to mount up really a lot of materials on this and just like taking this particular concept. What I found is like when you take a small piece of music and really have a close look at it, then it starts to really reveal itself to you. So with this piece, and I'm still talking about the computer, with this piece, it's easier for me because I've looked at it from a lot of different ways. But I will say that the orchestra piece presented a challenge for me because the chamber orchestra piece is already perfect, but I didn't want to. And I just found out about this year. I did not want to have an opportunity to have a piece for orchestra and not have a piece for orchestra. So, but the challenges that I'm finding with this piece is that once I added the other instruments, and then I decided to start the piece in a different way. I'm starting with percussion. And then after percussion, and then the brass is in. Okay. And then the brass is in, and then I'm taking out the part where it started before with the bassoon and the flute and the strings, and going directly. It's odd the way these things happen. The chamber piece came about because I got a call from the people in New York. But there wasn't enough time. You see what I'm saying? So I had to do it in that way, and the instrumentation that they had prompted me to use the harp, you know, to enhance the strings. That version was for flute, bassoon, oboe, clarinet, tubular bells, harp, and strings. Okay, so but it's challenging because it. The way I've just been putting down all of the ideas. That's why I said talk to me at the end of next week when I have some real concentrated time. I mean, I function better like that. That's why I got out of the city a long time ago, because I wanted to get away and try to see if I had anything happening at all on my own. So, and when I did, and I moved into the country and I looked into the mirror, I didn't really see that much. But then out of that period did come this particular piece. So, yeah, I function much better when I really have some time to really do things. If I don't have the time to do them, then I try to cut things down into smaller increments so I can see some kind of progress there, you know. So, yeah, being able to do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else you'd like to say about Angel City before we hear it? Anything you want to reveal to us about the piece?
Well, I don't know. I mean, let's see what happens after tonight. I'm a firm believer that every second is different. So if something evolves out of tonight, then that would be great. I'd love to have that happen. I don't want to be. What do I not want to be? I would like to keep being in the moment a little bit. You know, I'm not even into doing all these pieces over and over and over again without something changing in them.
You mean you don't want to get analytical about them before playing, probably?
Well, no, it's not that. I don't want to say that about it. But I think that when we exist in that way, it opens the door for things to happen each time there's a performance of the piece.
Well, wonderful. So, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. We'll have a short 10-minute break. Come back with music.